Going on? It is Carlo from Four Guys with Quarters, and I have a very special interview today with George Gomez. Before I let him introduce himself real quick, I'm just going to let you know that Mav from Xbox Ultimate is on the panel with me today to help ask some questions, and he's also part of Four Guys with Quarters. But I'm going to go right into you, George. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I'm a very lucky guy. I've spent my entire professional career creating entertainment stuff, and I've bounced around a bunch of different mediums. So, so I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm an industrial designer by trade. I have a bachelor's degree in industrial design, and when I was in school, industrial designers are sort of, I don't know if you know what they are, but they are sort of the architects of products. They are more involved in what does it feel like, what does it look like, how do you interact with it, and how does it make you feel side of things. Like the guys that determine what a car looks like, the guys that will design a piece of furniture, the guys that designed your iPhone. Those are industrial designers. And engineers work on, making sure that it works and it's reliable, and you can mass produce it. And there's a little bit of crossover. So a good way to think about it is an industrial designer is like a cross between an artist and an engineer. An engineer is all about how many gears, how many ball bearings, and a designer is all about, what does it look like? What does it feel like? How do I relate to it? How do I use it? What does it make me feel when I use it? Right. So we worry about form and color and what does it sound like? And what does the tactile stuff feel like? Does it feel good? We'll talk a little bit about some of the very first stuff I did, which was controller stuff. But so I got this design degree. I went to a very generalist design school, meaning that, it wasn't a school that was all about car design or all about, furniture design, or so guys were going in all kinds of different directions. And coming up towards graduation, I honestly wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I was playing games, so just to set the table for you, this is like, I graduated in May of 1978. So, get in the Wayback Machine and go back to what games looked like in 1978. And they were pretty primitive, right? So I, on my way between classes, or when I had a study break or whatever, I'd be in the arcade at the university, checking out the games, playing games, etc. And, I had a teacher that said, you should work on something you're really passionate about, because you're going to be a lot better at it. And I had another teacher that said, you should go to work at a place where, he basically said, you could take a traditional route. You can go to a place that hires designers, and, you can work your way up and do whatever it is you want to do there. Or you can go to a place where they don't know they need you, but you know they need you, so that your skills, will make you a big fish in a little pond pretty quickly, because you'll be there with a skill set that they don't have, and they'll quickly understand that they need it. So, here I am playing these games, and I was playing this game, and I thought, games were black and white. The controllers were things like, bicycle grips on a joystick. Cabinets were horrible. Art was horrible. Nothing looked like what you would imagine it should. And I don't know, out of ignorance, I looked at this and I go, man, these guys, they need help. This is really bad. So, I started thinking about it, and on a lark, I was talking to a recruiter, and the guy said to me, what do you want me to, like, where do you want me to go? Like, where do you want me to go see if I can get you a job? And I said, well, I'm playing games. And guy goes, I can get you a call at Midway Games in Franklin Park, Illinois. I don't know if they'll hire you, but I can get you an interview. So, cold call into Midway, and the guy on the other end says, yeah, we're hiring a bunch of different people, and with all the ignorance, and arrogance of a 22-year-old, I tell this guy, I'm a designer and you need me. Your stuff is horrible. This guy says to me, the guy you got to talk to, he's traveling right now, but he'll be back in 2-3 weeks. And so in that time, I took a Polaroid camera. Remember those?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Take a picture, here comes the photo, right? I mean, just to set, just imagine that was, there wasn't running, we weren't running around with phones taking pictures of things. So with a Polaroid camera, I ran around a bunch of different arcades that I knew, and I took pictures of Midway stuff. And back in those days, a designer interviewed with a portfolio. And a portfolio was this big giant book with all your renderings and sketches and photos of your models and stuff like that, right? So you could talk about your design projects, and the guy would be flipping pages in your book, And so I took a section of my book, and my book, was very, I think looking back, it's a miracle anybody hired me. I thought it was very uninspiring. I thought I had the usual cross section of school projects, and I don't think any of them were too inspiring.
Do you still have that book by chance?
No, I don't think I do. I mean, I wish I did. I actually wish I had the Midway stuff, the stuff I took into Midway, because so I took the Polaroids and I took them home, and I took a section of my portfolio and I restyled all their stuff, and I didn't know where my job would start or stop. So I designed stuff on the screen. I did art for the cabinets. I styled the cabinets. I did controllers. I did all this stuff because I didn't know, there's different guys do different things, just out of ignorance. And I mean, I knew there would be engineers involved and stuff, but I just didn't know who's dreaming this stuff up and how's it coming to be. So, I went for the interview, and they start, the first, you meet the HR people, and then they start bringing these guys through, and, engineers mostly, and people are looking at my book, and a bunch of different guys come through. And then the last guy is the guy that's running the show, and he comes in and he looks, and this guy says, let me show you around. And, he takes me on a tour of Midway Games. And at the time, Midway was the largest manufacturer of coin-operated video games in North America, and might be the world, just because they were making so much licensed stuff. And the day I interviewed, they were making Taito Space Invaders for North America on the Midway assembly lines, and Midway had this enormous, beautiful, fairly relatively new facility, and it was like that. It was like that scene in Indiana Jones where they're hauling the ark into the warehouse, except this guy throws the doors open, and here's this enormous factory, really well lit, and there are Space Invaders on an assembly line as far as the eye could see.
Wow.
And I mean, it was just, I'm 22 years old. I'm looking at this, like, holy crap, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. It's like you get whacked in the head by all of the sound of the air tools, that they're using to screw the games together. And the place is just a beehive of activity, right? There's carts with 19-inch CRTs being rolled around, and there's, people scrambling on games and putting, art on things. And I mean, it's crazy. It's just nothing I'd ever seen, I was just, but I was like, oh, wow, this is just, this guy walks me back to the office area, and he says, son, I'm going to change your life. It's $300 a week. When can you start? And I
Wow.
was, you know, first of all, I thought $300 a week. I thought I was rich. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's a different time and place, so
Yeah.
that's a good first job back then,
Yeah.
right?
It was like 1978, $15,000 a year. I think my father was making $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
He'd been working all his life. So,
Wow.
it was an exciting time for me. I got in there, and at first they wouldn't let me do it. They wouldn't let me get near a game. It was all, I was attached to an in-house engineering group that basically we took all the licensed product, because so the Japanese companies like, Namco and Sega and Taito and everybody they were doing business with, they would send over just printed circuit boards with the ROMs, for the code and the art. And because it was much cheaper to send that stuff, put that stuff on a ship or on an airplane in an emergency and get it here, than it was to send entire cabinets. So one of the things that Midway did was, all of that stuff got designed in-house. The other issue was every material in Japan at the time was, and still is, metric measurements. And in the States, we were still English measure, so, you had a piece of cabinet would be made out of 15 millimeter plywood. And over here it would be made out of 3/4 inch plywood, so you couldn't take a Japanese engineering drawing set and recreate their stuff just because our materials were just different, different measurements. Our raw material was different measurements. So we would have to redesign all that stuff. So it was like, because it was in that era, it was hard to source 15 millimeter plywood. It was hard to source, metric shafts and bearings and all this stuff, right? So everything got redone over here, which is why I'm sure you guys have seen this in the documentation of the old games. That's why a lot of times the Japanese version of Pac-Man looks nothing like the American version of Pac-Man, right? It was like, it was a white cabinet with a different art, and the American one that everybody knows was yellow, with a completely different art. The original one over there was called Puck-Man. Over here it was called Pac-Man because, a really smart guy in our marketing department decided that people were going to be, changing the C to an or the P to an F.
That'd have been a little easy.
Yeah. So initially I was attached to this group, and they would bring me a game and they would say, you need to style up some controls and make this thing look cool. And so I was just working on that. There was a couple of guys, it was a very diverse group, meaning that, there were software engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, cable designers, artists. But, I was the only, for all intents and purposes, there weren't any other real industrial designers in the group and pushing ideas. So there was, the company had these two captive R&D groups that generated ideas and new games for Midway, besides the licensed product. One of them was Dave Nutting and Associates, who you've heard of, whom I'm sure you've heard of, the guys that did Gorf and Wizard of War and a bunch of, and they were, Dave Nutting was a brilliant guy. He's one of my mentors. Turns out Dave's background, Dave was also an industrial designer. So I consider him an early mentor. And I didn't find this out initially when I went to work there, but, and then there was a group in South Florida, the guys that did Omega Race. Have you ever seen that game, a vector game? Omega Race, it was a really smart guy. Ron Halliburton was running this group. It was called Arcade Engineering. So those are the two captive groups. So the company was manufacturing games that were generated by those two groups and licensing all this Japanese product, right? Wow. So licensing Space Invaders and Pac-Man and, Rally X and Galaxian and, Galaga and all that stuff, right? So So it was, the company was a beehive of activity. There was a lot of stuff going on. It was an amazing place to work. And I we were myself and a couple other young guys, a guy named Bill Adams and a guy named Atish Ghosh. Bill Adams, software engineer, had a master's degree in computer science from the University of Illinois, really bright guy. And the other guy was a guy named Atish Ghosh, who was an electrical engineer, a hardware designer. And he had gone to school at IIT here in the city in Chicago, and really bright guys. We'd go out to lunch and we'd play games, and we'd talk about, man, we want to make a game, we want a shot, we got to, let's make a game. And, the company, we were just like small fish, we were just, not in the mainstream, so to speak. Right. So, but Bill was always pushing really hard, and he did the very first thing that we did as a group was Satan's Hollow, and at the time, Bill programmed the game. I didn't have much. I honestly didn't have that much to do with it. He was very clear on his vision. My biggest contribution of the thing was the bird patterns, the flight patterns for the birds.
Right.
And the 3-frame animation of the bird. We did that game, and right around that time, a guy named Tom Neiman, who was the company's licensing guy, and Midway, for people that don't know it, Midway was owned by Bally. So Midway was a Bally company, and Bally was at one point a bigger company, had made basically made its money in pinball. They were to this day one of the most recognized brands in pinball in the world is the Bally brand, right? But at the time, in this time frame, they had bought, they bought Midway in the early 70s. They bought them probably 5 or 6 years before I joined the company. And they bought this little Midway company because they had a footprint in video games, which Bally didn't have. With some of the early, Midway stuff that Dave Nutting worked on, things like, 280 Zap. Did you ever see that game? It's like a driving game. Games like Gunfight and Seawolf, the submarine game. So a lot of, yeah. So I mean, that stuff established them, and they had a footprint in video games, which Bally didn't have. They also had, they came from a line of they basically came from novelty games. So they had done, when I was a kid in the arcades, when I'd go to the bowling alley, and on Saturdays, to bowl with the Cub Scouts or whatever, and if I had a couple of spare quarters, I would hit the arcade in the bowling alley, and the place was full of Midway gun games. Midway was famous for gun games, and they literally would buy 22s and disable them, and cut the barrels down and make sure they couldn't be used as weapons, and they would mount them on games, and they'd make them, they'd tie them to potentiometers and stuff to tell where the gun was, and they made all those amazing electromechanical gun games. If you ever go to one of the museums, like Marvelous Marvin's, or one of those places that has a lot of that older stuff, check out the Midway gun games. I mean, they were works of art. They were the state of the art in gun games. Sega, of all companies, was a company that dabbled in gun games quite a bit.
Yeah, even the Sega Master System came with a gun.
Yep. So anyway, I mean, so Tom Neiman comes back to the company with the notion that Disney is doing a game called Tron, a movie about video games called Tron, and they're looking for a video game partner, and it would be a great opportunity. So they he says this to the company, and right away the company's thinking, yeah, great idea. We'll get Dave Nutting and Associates Arcade Engineering to do a game, and that'll be Tron. And we got wind of it somehow. Atish and I think Bill Adams was higher up in the food chain than Atish and I, and he got wind of it. And Bill comes back to us and go, Disney's doing and I got the scripts. And I'm like, well, and they tells us that they're going to have this, sort of internal, informal competition internally to decide who makes the game. And we're like out of our minds. So we got to throw our hat in the ring, and we've got day jobs for the company doing the things that we got to do, but we really wanted to do this game. And so Bill, I think, begged to be included. And I think, that, nobody imagined that it was going to be us that was going to end up with the work. We didn't imagine, we were like, oh yeah, well, it'll be fun to do it. They're not going to let us do it, but it'll be fun to do it. It'd be fun to pitch. So, we had, so they had this big scheme. They were going to put games had to be done at a certain time in anticipation of the premiere of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to put games in all of the Aladdin's Castle arcades all over the country. And they were going to have a competition. And the 30 winners from the competition, 30 or 32, I can't remember how many, from the national, from the guys that played off through the regionals, et cetera, would go to Madison Square Garden in New York, and we'd have 30 Tron games, and these kids would play off, and then we'd all go to lunch at Tavern on Green, and then we'd go to the movie premiere, meet the movie stars. And so the games had to be done, with anticipation of the movie launch. And so we took all of this in. We took all this in. We read the scripts, and we didn't have very many visuals. They didn't give us much in those early days. We were imagining what things were. They didn't really show us much. And we went to work and almost on our time because, we had, like I said, we had real jobs for the company, and we generated a pitch. And we took the attitude. Bill's a really smart guy, and Bill is a strategy guy, and so Bill, he starts thinking into what the other guys are going to do.
Right.
Well, I know Arcade's going to bring a vector graphics hardware set. I know it because they have the vector graphics from Omega Race. That's what they're going to do. And Nutting is going to have, Nutting was playing with, and you got to put this in the context of the time. This must have been 81, 82. I can't remember exactly, but Nutting was playing with a 3-dimensional graphics hardware set, vector graphics, 3D vector graphics at the time. And back in those days, everything was raster pixel stuff, with the exception of some of the Atari vector stuff and the occasional, Cinematronics did vector stuff, but nobody was doing 3D graphics, so Nutting had this flying game. It was really impossible to control, but it was blown, it was blow away cool because nobody had ever seen anything like this. So it was there was the closest thing to it was the Atari tank game Battlezone, right?
Yeah.
But Battlezone was, a very controlled camera, and you weren't really moving in 3 space very much. So it didn't really have, the Nutting thing was like, holy crap, this is like an open world like we know it today. And it's 1981. But the problem was it was bleeding edge. It was so bleeding edge. They couldn't even keep the hardware running. They would demo it on they had a table, they had a folding table full of hardware, hooked to a thing, hooked to the controllers and the game, and they would sit you down in the seat. You'd get in this flying game, and Nutting would put, they'd dim the lights in the room, put on Sprach Zarathustra, and like it was a blowaway cool experience, but it was light years from being manufacturable in any reasonable way. They were like guys with cool spraying the boards to keep them cool in the back. Seriously, it was bleeding edge. That's what you get with bleeding edge, right? So it's like, so Bill says, yeah, Nutting's gonna he's gonna reach for the sky, and they're not gonna be done in time. And Arcade's gonna work with their thing, and we really ought to focus on making it look as much like Tron as we can. We can use an off-the-shelf proven hardware set. Atish, the third guy in our little group, had designed what is known as the Midway Card Rack 2, the MCR2, which basically ended up fielding games like Tron and a bunch of other games. Eventually, an evolution of that hardware was made to scroll, and that became the Spy Hunter hardware. But it was an interesting hardware set. He took a different approach. The Willy guys were the Willy system that used, like the Defender Robotron system, RAM-based, lots of scrolling stuff. Atish's system had a foreground plane and a background plane. The background plane was intended to be almost static art. You could page it, you could change pages and stuff, and page in a new there was you could buffer a page and drop it in and stuff, but it wasn't intended to be very dynamic, and it was half the resolution of the foreground stuff. And the foreground stuff was 32 pixel by 32 pixel sprites. Back then Midway we called them picture blocks. So those 32 pixel by 32 pixel picture blocks, and I think I don't know, I want to say I think it was either 32 colors in the foreground, 16 in the background. The background was half the resolution of the foreground. You could have lots of moving stuff in the foreground. You could have all kinds of stuff moving in the foreground, and not so much on the background. And Atish used to tell me, "You got 4,096 colors to work from," and I'd say, "Wow, really?" And he'd say, "Yeah, you'd only use 16 at a time." I would be like, "Dude, 4,096 colors? I mean, come on, I can use 16 of them or 32 or something." So so we set off and we said, "Hey, let's do it on the MCR2." I did a whole bunch of these boards to convey what the screens would look like. And we had all these waves, we had 7 or 8 waves. I don't know what we were thinking. We ran out of resources at 4. We had, so we made a pitch. I designed a cabinet. I took the grips that I had worked on for the Gorf game, and we made them glow. And that was an accident also. I was playing around with black lights because a lot of the Tron stuff had this glowy look, and we hadn't seen much of it, but we saw a few snippets and everything was glowing. And initially the good guys were red and the bad guys were blue, and then they swapped that. But so we had some snippets of stuff glowing, and I was playing around with a black light trying to make stuff glow, and I had the black light sitting on my desk one night, and it was the end of the night. It was 7 o'clock at night, and I had taken a Tron grip. We were having an issue with the switch inside the grip. It wasn't a Tron grip at the time. It was a Gorf grip. We were having an issue, and it's not like today where we've got all this stuff in CAD. We can make stuff transparent. We can see what's going on. We can do simulations. We do stuff like that. We didn't have any of that. So we're working on the drawing board with paper and stuff. So I asked the vendor that made that molded the grips for us to mold it out of clear styrene for me, just so I could look inside and see what was going on. And I I had one on my desk, and I'm walking out my office at night. I turn off the lights, and I look back, and the grip, which is sitting on my desk, is glowing blue because I had left the black light on, and the plastic was just picking up all the light from the black light. And I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing. That's what I got to do. And then I turned right back around and started playing with it. And that, I mean, that's the story of that's the story of the glowing grip. And then we ran into problems because most plastics have, ultraviolet inhibitors put in them so that the sun doesn't degrade them, so they don't like come apart, the self-destruct. Eventually they all do, by the way, even with the UV inhibitors. But so this guy said, well, you can't make it out of styrene because it's not going to be tough enough. You got to be in polycarbonate or something tougher. And he brought it to me and put it on my desk, and it didn't glow. And I was like, well, this doesn't work. It's not glowing. And he goes, oh, I know what's up. It's got the UV inhibitors in it. I said, take them out. So we took the UV inhibitors out of it. We made them that way, which is why everybody's Tron grips self-destructed
Right.
5 or 6 years after we made the game, because they were totally exposed to the black light, degrading the plastic, but they glowed. So we went to the little playoff, and I think that Arcade and DNA, those guys, they were established. They were the real deal. We were up and coming guys. We didn't know anything. And I just imagined that in their minds, they were so confident that one of them was going to end up with the game that they showed up with nothing but a conversation at the thing. And, we had glowing grips and drawings, and we had stuff moving on screen, and we had a plan. Bill said, we're going to use the MCR2, so we don't have to design any hardware. We can start working tomorrow. And I think the management guys, they saw the energy and the passion that we were bringing to it, and they said, you guys are going to get the call. So then it was like, then we got the sit down. Listen, we've made commitments. We've made commitments to Disney. Bally, by the way, owned Aladdin's Castle, the arcade chain. So, we've made commitments to this competition, to the Aladdin's Castle. You guys cannot be late. This game has to be done on time, and there's no screwing around. And so, we're okay, and we're going to do it. And Bill is real smart. He put a programmer on each wave. The very first wave we ran into problems with, by the way, was the discs wave, which became the sequel, Discotron.
Discotron, yeah.
Yeah, because we had nowhere near the amount of resources. That one wave would have chewed up every resource in the system just by itself. So we quickly punted. Okay, you can't do that. That'll be the sequel. And then what you see is what we ended up getting done, and we made it. We went to the playoffs and watched the kids play. And
what inspired the light cycles, snake style gameplay?
Came from Disney. We didn't invent it. They had basically they had looked at all the different games in the world and then taken a step in the direction of visualizing them, in a more evolved way. So, right. They got Sid Mead to design the light cycles, and and so when we looked at it, we didn't visualize it, but they described it. And when we got it, we had played the game, so we were like, oh yeah, it's a version of, if you look at the games, like the stuff that we came up with, I got a lot of grief about the notion of translation and rotation on the character, right? Because there was a guy, really bright guy, the guy who was in charge of all product development for the entire corporation. Super bright guy. Marty Kane is his name, Dr. Marty Kane. And, an engineer with a PhD, super bright. This guy had spent time at GM and in a think lab and think tank. And Marty Kane said to me, like, we described the controls and said, I got a joystick and I got a knob, and the joystick's going to move Tron, and it's going to move the tank, and it's going to move the light cycle, and then the knob is going to like rotate his arm so that he can aim and rotate and so this guy says to me, he goes, translation and rotation, it's like rubbing your belly and patting your head at the same time. It's really hard to do. And so they made me, they basically said, you better prototype that right away, because, we don't think it's going to work. So Bill and I prototyped it. Bill said to me, he goes, make me an encoder. I think it was like 64 positions, an optical encoder. So I made him a big wheel with all these, 64 slots, and a couple of optos. We got it to work. So, there were challenges all along. I spent a great deal of that winter at Disney Studios, seeing what they were doing, and then like seeing what we could integrate from their stuff. And there was a little bit of back and forth, right? The cabinet that shows up in Flynn's arcade in the first film is one of the cabinets in the arcade, is my prototype, my handmade prototype.
Oh, wow.
Which we flew out there, and I sent me out there with it, and they powered it up. I think he's playing Space Paranoids in it. Not sure. I don't remember. But it was a trip. So after that, now we were getting some traction, and the company decided that they were going to give us some resources, and Bill got to build out the group, and they put us in a warehouse off-site on Hart Street in Franklin Park, Illinois. And so I don't know if you've heard, if you ever talked to Brian Colin, he's one of the designers of like Rampage, right?
Oh, wow.
And so Brian, you'll hear people refer to the Hart Street group, and that was us. That was the Hart Street group. That was basically in that era. That was the development studio. That was the sort of the in-house development studio at Midway Games. And a lot of the games that came out of there were games like Rampage, like Spy Hunter, like Tron and Satan's Hollow, and
so all the games that we played as kids in the arcade, pretty much.
Well, not all of them. There was a lot of Japanese.
Pretty
stuff.
much.
Yeah, a lot of Japanese stuff. But I mean, So what can I tell you? I mean, that was the deal. I think that as the Spy Hunter story is a similar sort of story, but it takes place some years later. In '84, the business crashed. I think you guys are aware of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Nintendo, the NES, kind of revitalized that. And a Spy Hunter actually was, I think, a good part of that, if I'm being honest. So
Spy Hunter played a role. It was the thing about Spy Hunter. So the company had sent me. It was a big perk that the company used with designers, that if you did well, you got like a first-class trip to the Japanese game show, which was called the JAMA show. And it was the Japanese Amusement Manufacturers Association or something in Tokyo. And so after Tron, I get to go. And so here I am, I'm whatever I was, 25 or 26, and I'm in Tokyo. And I'm running around Tokyo. I'm there to see a game show, which is like, it's like amazing, right? Like that was the game show where, did you ever see a a game called Pengo. Pengo was introduced in that game, you know, penguins. I remember that. You can look it up. I remember that from that game show. So that sort of sets it for me. But so I'm running around Tokyo. I bought a Canon 35mm camera. I bought a Sony Walkman. And for my Walkman, I bought James Bond's Greatest Hits, right? Cassette, right? So here I am flying back home from the show, and company had a policy at the time that any flight over 4 hours, you flew first class. So,
oh, cool.
So imagine me, I'm sitting up front, you know, like ordering rum and cokes, flying first class. Yeah, I think I'm on top of the world. And 747, you know, Tokyo to Chicago.
That must have been an experience. That was a different time for flying back then.
It was
too.
totally.
It was very
yeah.
You know, it was a cool thing to do.
Planes were cool. It was you know, that whole thing was it's not the hell you guys know.
Yeah.
So.
Were people smoking on the planes still?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's just crazy. But you can say it's a better time also potentially.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've learned a lot. But yeah, so you know, I'm sitting there and Bill and Atish and I in our continued outings to lunch, you know, we used to see all the movies and everything, right? So we had seen, you remember a helicopter movie with Roy Scheider called Blue Thunder? Police helicopter with a lot of weapons, right? Weapons and trick stuff. And we had been talking about, you know, hey, we should do a game with a helicopter with a lot of weapons. And then the Bond conversation would come up, you know, and say, hey, no, what about a spy game with a car with a lot of weapons? And on the way home, that James Bond Greatest Hits cassette sort of cemented it in my head, you know. I started thinking about, you know, those scenes in James Bond movies where he's about to get into an enormous fight with overwhelming odds. Right. And, you know, like that scene in You Only Live Twice, he's in the little helicopter. And the very first thing that happens is the music comes up, right? Music comes up, the Bond theme comes up. And then all of a sudden it's like the music has increases in tempo to the intensity of the fight. And, you know, he's overwhelming odds, you know, he's going to overcome, but because he's James Bond, but it's still like a really cool feeling. And now we take this for granted in games today, right? Everything we play has cinematic moments, has moments where, you know, the game designers have worked really hard to put you in that spot, to make you feel like that hero, right? That, you know, in everything they've done, right? In the armor you're wearing, the vehicle you're in, the music that's going on, the overwhelming odds, all those moments are highly orchestrated moments that we take for granted in the world of our games today. But if you roll the tape back to 1983 or whenever it is that I was working on that game, that's not how games were. Games didn't have epic moments where the music came up and, you know, the bad guys were there, you had to overcome, right? Games had, little sounds, dun, 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 you know, the world was different, right? So I was trying in my mind, I was like, you know, the zen of driving music and combined with the notion of, you know, this scenario, the ability to put this guy in the scenario, right? So I come home and I start talking to, so I'm Cuban. I came to this country as a refugee when I was 7. And there was another developer in our group who was also Cuban. His name is Tom Leone, and he's not with us anymore, but Tom is a really bright guy. He is the programmer of Spy Hunter. and Tom and I would go to lunch, and sometimes we would drive home together. His mother would make Cuban food, and we'd stop at his mother's for dinner, and we'd talk about games. We'd talk about what we were doing. Tom, by the way, when I told you that Bill Adams broke down the programming of the different waves in Tron, Tom and I worked on the tank wave together. So
Oh, wow.
we had a relationship from that, and we used to drive home and talk about, what game should we make? Bill had moved on. He had gone to work for a different company, and Tom and I would talk about, and we were both sort of, we were a couple of refugee Cuban kids, children of the Cold War for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. First off, that two Cuban refugees like ended up working on Spy Hunter. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's freaking cool.
Well, that's real, man. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So we started talking about this game, and we had other games that we were working on, and there were sanctioned projects the company had. And the whole Spy Hunter thing started out with us just screwing around. So I had like an 18-inch roll of drawing paper, and I'd taken the drawing paper and I'd drawn the road and little events on the road, like this happens here and this happens here. And this thing, initially, when we started this game, we were in the old Hart Street office, and Tom was in a cubicle, and he had taken this thing and he had put it up along the walls of his cubicle. This whole, paper pinned up, the road, right?
Yeah.
And we started working on this thing sort of on the side, and we initially digitized the James Bond theme from that cassette that I bought in Tokyo, and we thought it was going to be a James Bond game, and that's where we were going. And Tom Neiman, the same guy that got the Tron license, came back and he said, "I can't get you James Bond." And I can't remember whether it was an issue with the music or the films. I don't remember what it was, but he couldn't get it. So he said, "How about Peter Gunn?" And now I knew Peter Gunn. Your generation doesn't know Peter Gunn. Your generation thinks Peter Gunn is Spy Hunter, because that's what you relate to it. But so Peter Gunn was a TV show with, I think, Roger Moore. Was it Roger Moore? No, it wasn't Roger Moore. Somebody else.
Roger Moore was probably James Bond.
Roger Moore.
Yeah.
I think Roger Moore was the Saint or somebody like that in that era. But whatever. So we switched over to Peter Gunn. We hated it. We were like, because we had been playing it with James Bond. So we put in the Peter Gunn thing. The Peter Gunn thing was very repetitive. And we had a sound guy, his name's Bob Libby, who said, "Hey, what if I do these jazz riffs?" And back then, hardware and sounds was really tied together. You almost had to be a hardware engineer and a musician to make sounds in that era. And he said, we're going to do these jazz riffs, and then the hardware is going to randomly tie them together in between Peter Gunn, so that it doesn't get repetitive and boring, right? Because I had come up with this thing where you only get music when you have weapons, because that's when we're going to bring in the bad guys, right? So you got to collect all your weapons, get all your stuff, and if you have weapons, you get music. Yeah, the only weapons you by default get are the machine guns. You don't get any of the other stuff. So that's where we were going, and that became really cool. So we actually trademarked that hardware set. It was called the Artificial Artist sound system, because the system randomly put those pieces of music together, and always started with Peter Gunn, ended with Peter Gunn. But the stuff in between, like if you were really good and you had music and you were driving for a long time with the music, you had these jazz riffs in between to sort of not make it monotonous and boring, and etc. So the truck's another one, right? The truck is, I always tell people that people ask me, how do you get to fun? How do you get to games? And games are all about iteration, right? We can all imagine fun in our heads, but the reality is that making games, you have to iterate. You have to iterate like crazy. And you're not coming up with the next great idea or the solution to your problem staring at your screen. Not going to happen. It's not going to come to you on a bus. I mean, you may have a direction that you thought of, but you're not going to solve the problem doing it that way. You got to solve the problem by doing. You have to make things. You have to try things. That's how you solve the problem. So the truck, Tom hated the truck. I hated the fact that the car was growing weapons at checkpoints. So you hit a checkpoint,
right?
The car would grow weapons. I thought this is the most unnatural thing in the world. I said, like, what, how did he grow weapons? Where did he get more bullets? How does this work? And Tom was like, what do you care? It's a video game. I was like, no, I care. It's got to make sense to me. And
yeah.
And so I of course Knight Rider in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
The Firebird went into a truck right into the with the scientist girl that fixed up Kit, right? And so I said, hey, why don't we get a truck? Whenever you call, you got to call the truck up and go in the back of the truck to get your weapons. And he fought me on this. I made the truck and we put it in the game and we tried it. And a funny thing happened. It became an element of strategy, right? Trying to call up the truck, stay alive, and deal with whatever the enemy threat was with whatever weapons you had until you got the correct weapons or more weapons became a thing in the game, which we would have never discovered had we not gone down the path of, like he agreed to, okay, all right, I'll put it in. All right, I'll put it in. And we put it in and it turned out to be a cool thing, right? But if you that's why I say you're going to get to solutions by making stuff. You're not going to get to solutions by thinking about it.
Was there a game like Spy Hunter really before it? Because going back, I can't really think of one that was even like that. But it was like shooting and driving at the same time, and it's also like kind of an adventure game as well. I would call it.
I mean, couple of the couple of the other guys, like contributed the boat. A guy named Steve Olstead said, hey, we should, let's turn the car into a boat. and then it became, and then a plane, right? So if you do a dump of the graphics ROMs in that game, you'll find a plane in there. Nobody knows why it's there. Wow. We just never got to that. So the story, what happened is, so now times are getting bad. The company's laying people off, and we're not making 1,100. We were making, like in the days that I described when I joined the company, we were making like 1,100 coin-operated video games a day. There was like a line of semis with raw material lined up on one end of the building, and a line of semis with finished games leaving on the other end of the building. And there were so many of these semi trucks that it disrupted the traffic patterns in Franklin Park, the little city that Midway was in. And the city had to put special cops in different places, everything just to direct traffic around these semis. So this had all begun to implode. The business is crashing, and we're not making 1,100 games a day. We're making 100 games a day, and management's panicking. We're trying all kinds of things. I think I was building they wanted me, my real job at the time, they wanted me to build an electromechanical baseball game. That's what I was working on when we were doing Spy Hunter. And then so they would do these sweeps of the development studio to look at product, the executives. And one day they come by on a show and tell, show and tell day, every show we're doing, and Spy Hunter is still not a thing. Nobody knows, it's like our boss knows we're fooling around with a driving game, and we've been working on it for months, but we don't, it's not real. It's not a sanctioned project of the company. And these guys they get all done with the day of reviews of all the games in progress, and they're standing in front of the elevator, I happen to be going to get a candy bar or something, and my boss sees me and he says, "Hey, can you guys show that driving game you're working on?" And we're like, "Yeah, we could do that." So give me 10 minutes. So I go back and Tom, they want to see the game. He's like, "What?" Like, "No, we got to do something. We got to show them the game." All right. So these guys, this group of execs comes back to Tom's cube where we got the game, and we demo the game. And the guy says, when can we get this on test? We're like, "Whoa, wait, on test? We're no, you guys don't understand. We're months away, fellas. This is like nothing. This is like unfinished. It doesn't work." And they're like, no, we got to get this on test. So shit. Okay. So then all of a sudden, now we got people. Now they're like, my boss says, "Okay, throw some people at this thing." So then all of a sudden we got all these artists, we got all this stuff. We're like, we're moving. Now we're moving. So we went on test probably, I don't know, 2.5 months after that date. And it did well enough that then it was a scramble to polish. Then the next thing they want to do is make it. And then we were like fighting for every minute to, polish it and make it right. And which is why there's no airplane mode in the game. No flying mode in the game. So yeah, it was, and then in 1984, I thought the business was over. I left the company. I left the company before Spy Hunter hit the assembly lines. Just totally disappointed, thinking that, this is all for naught. This is going away. And I went to work for a consulting firm as a toy inventor. And I invented toys for all the major toy companies for the next 5 years. But I mean, that was like, that was so it was, it's interesting when I think back about that time. It's almost bittersweet because I wasn't there to sort of drink in the success of Spy Hunter.
Right.
But and if you look at the side of the game, back then they were like, I think the company was like really scared of making us famous, and so they wouldn't let us sign our stuff. So all of our names and initials and everything, everybody who worked on a game is like hidden on that art panel.
Oh, really?
On the side.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you look at it, the car is called an Interceptor because I had a Honda Interceptor Superbike at the time, and it's called an Interceptor G6155. 6155 is my birthday, and G is my initial. And to this day, I mean, like the Lego guys made a little Spy Hunter, a Lego Dimensions set, right? And they put G6155 on the toy, and they don't know what that is. They just know it's like the Spy Hunter thing.
That's cool, man.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. So then, I mean, that was your way back then of getting your little Easter eggs in the games.
Yeah.
Like
if
some
you look
devs
at, I
do
think
today.
it's the Gorf grip, which really the concept of the grip and the flight stick really belongs to Dave Nutting, but I styled that grip and carved it with my hands and drew it and everything. That grip is in the back of that thing. There's like a thing that looks like an LED panel that lights up, and my name's in there. If you look at those, you ever find one of those? It's like my name's hidden in there. So yeah, we used to hide our names. We used to hide our names on all that stuff.
That is so cool.
You said you went to make toys for 5 years or invent
Yeah, I was
toys.
a toy inventor.
Is there any notable toys that you may have invented that we may know of from that?
Yeah, I mean, I can send you guys some video links to stuff. I did these trucks for Galoob called Crash and Bash. I did some foam darts that are sort of like a reusable water balloon for Tonka. I did a bad guy action figure for the Rambo toy line.
Oh,
I did a couple of Voltron vehicles, bad guy.
Oh, wow.
Voltron vehicles. So yeah, the toy invention game is a whole different animal. It's like that's just like, I worked for a consulting firm. All we did was invent stuff and then license the ideas to the big toy companies. And it was a place called Marvin Glass and Associates. And the most famous toy inventors in the world, and they collectively over time they invented Light Bright, Simon, Operation. I mean, you just name it. It's like the who's who of toys, and so that's a different game. That's like invent something, prototype it as fast and quick as you can, and then pitch it, and then you never know. You got to have really tough skin because the rejection rates are super high. So
whenever I think of toy invention, I always think back to Big and Tom Hanks when he got to go work in the corporate toy manufacturer. And
so I mean, I was there like whatever that was, fall of '84 to '88 in that time frame, and that's what I did as I invented toys, and it was great fun. It was a super super talented studio, great place to work. The coolest thing about that place was that nobody told you what to work on. So whatever you did that day is what you did. And if you were a self-motivated guy, and you could just constantly be thinking about stuff and making stuff and trying things, you'd be very successful. If you're some guys, they're not worse because of it. They're just different. Some guys need to work in a structure. They need, I give me a project, I'll do it, etc. So that place had a big revolving door. A lot of guys came and went through that place because not everybody could hang in that. It's like, nobody's going to tell me what to do today. And I could fuck off, or I could actually do something. And so you got to be, sort of constantly jamming on stuff. You got to average a lot of concepts, a lot of working concepts at the end of your year. And you got to do one a week. You got to average one a week to place 3, and of those 3, 2 of them may fall out of bed, and then there's no in the process, right? Like the moms may kill it in focus testing, or it may fall out in safety testing, or the stores might, Walmart might say, yeah, we don't like it, and so you just never know. So if you actually get on the shelf with a toy idea and a toy concept, you're still at the mercy of the audience to say yay or nay, right? Just because you got there doesn't mean anything. So it's a tough business. It's even tougher today because kids get into electronics so soon, right? They're into screens right away, and they're spending a lot less time with conventional toys and traditional, hard plastic stuff, and so it's a really hard business. I feel bad for a lot of the guys that I know that have struggled in that business as of late. But no, I did that. I designed a bunch of novelty games, ticket spitters for different companies after that time. And it was during that time that I got involved with pinball. I looked at a pinball machine, and I'm used to thinking along the lines of, I don't know what it is today, but back in my day, you could look at an item on a shelf at Toys R Us, and if you divide the price by 5, that's probably what it costs to make it. So you got an item that's $15.95, divide that by 5, and that's what the designer's working with. That's what it's got to cost. So, here I am trying to make something cool with a 9-volt battery, an LED, and a couple of gears. And I looked at a pinball machine. I was like, wow, look at this. Check this thing out. And at the time, it was like, it's a $3,500 toy. So this will be fun to make. I wasn't that into pinball. I was more fascinated by the notion of creating this giant toy. And so I got into it, and then it got in my blood. And so today I'm the chief creative officer for Stern Pinball. We're the biggest pinball company in the world. We have probably 90% of the world market in pinball. And I run a studio, about 50 guys, guys and girls. They design and generate all the company's products. But in between, I went back to work at Williams Electronics, designing my first pinball machines. It was like the early 90s. I was there up until the 2000s and early 2000s, at which point Williams got out of the pinball business and I was out of a job. And a guy whom you may know, Mark Turmel, inventor of NBA Jam and NFL Blitz and many, many other games, right? Famous game designer, was a friend of mine. And Mark said, why don't you come over to Midway? And I'm starting up this thing called the sports division, over the top Midway Sports, and help me run this thing. And so him and I, for the next I don't know, probably 9 years, worked on the Xbox and PlayStation versions of NBA Ballers. The NBA licensed over the top street basketball game.
Oh, wow. That's really awesome.
Yeah. And after that, I during that time on the side, I was doing, just for the hell of it, Gary Stern had called me up and said, hey, would you do some pinball ideas? And so I said, sure. I went to see Ken Fidesz, and the guy was running Midway at the time. I said, hey, do you care if I do this? And he said, no, we don't compete in that business anymore. So I don't care what you do on your time. And so I started doing games for Gary on the side. And that's what opened the door to the relationship I have with them today. And then in 2011, I went to work there full time, running product development in the role that I'm in now. So I mean, that's the arc of my story, right? So I did coin operated vids, I did toys, I did novelty games, I did Xbox, PlayStation stuff, and I did pinball. So a lot of weird stuff. And, I think I'm 65, and I think it's helped to keep me young.
You look young for your age, man. So
Thank you.
Good for you on that.
I'm going gray. There's no hiding it.
Yeah. Well, I got gray going on my goatee already, and I'm half your age. And I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you, half, but. I honestly could not be doing the job I do today. My studio is incredibly diverse in terms of talent. I have designers, I have software developers, I have of every sort, right? I have gameplay guys, and I have I have tools guys, and I have effects guys, and I have the equivalent of a video game development art team, because we have an LCD screen on our games, and so we have to generate content for that. So I have an entire art, computer graphics art team, animators, modelers, shaders, environment guys, all that stuff that goes into a video game team. I have mechanical engineers, I have electrical engineers, I have cable designers, I have technicians, I have two-dimensional illustrators, artists, that do all the flat art. And I don't think I could be running or managing this group had I not been in all the places I've been, throughout my career, right? Because this thing that we make, this very complex modern day pinball machine, has elements of everything I've worked on. It's got three-dimensional molded toys that interact with things and transform and do things. It's got software, and it's got gameplay dynamics and rule sets and game progression. It's got art. It's got it's got everything that all of those experiences, right? I mean, when I was at Midway, and I'm managing a big development group of software developers, I learned how to manage a software project of that scale. All of these things, all these different things have sort of informed what I do, my skill set, and so I'm blessed that it's just sort of happenstance that all that stuff kind of landed, exposed me to this and landed me where I am.
We actually have some questions in the chat already. One of the questions was from Infinite, and he asked, in your early days, getting into video games, what were some of your influences?
Right. So, it was a heady time, meaning that there was so much cool stuff happening. It's not games today, by the way, I still play games today. So I don't mean this to sound as a slight to the games we play today, because the games we play today are they're different, but they all fall into genres, and a fresh play mechanic is kind of tough to come by, right? And what do I mean by that? They're drivers, they're shooters, they're RPGs, they're they're sports, they're they fall into a genre, right? And now turn the dial back to 1982, and you got Missile Command, Joust, asteroids. You just name the pantheon of amazing stuff, and they're all different. Super Cobra, Zaxxon. I mean, just start naming games. Start in 1978 with Space Invaders, 77 with Space Invaders, and name games from 1977 to 1986, right? Just name, Centipede, Battlezone. Just when I say these words, your brain is envisioning completely dynamically diverse play mechanics. Every game. It doesn't mean that Pac-Man didn't spur 1,000 maze games. It did. It doesn't mean that Space Invaders didn't spur a bunch of derivative clones. It did. You can say that Galaga, Galaxian were informed by the work of Space Invaders. You can't not say that, right? But there was a moment in time when you were seeing fresh play mechanics. Missile Command. Tell me what informed that? Centipede. It's like you could make some analogy to Space Invaders, but so think about that. So that when you say what influenced me, that influenced me. The fact that every year the wave of games that was being introduced was dynamically. I was a huge fan of the Atari stuff. I was a huge fan of the Williams stuff, right? Defender, Stargate, Robotron, Joust, that Williams stuff. By the way, those guys, Eugene Jarvis, Larry DeMar, good friends of mine. And I didn't know them then, right? But that's what I was putting my money in. I was, it's like there was a bar, there was a punk bar called Exit that I used to go to in Chicago, and they had a Defender, and the bartender had my number because every time I walked in there, he would tell me there was another guy that went there, and I didn't meet him until many, many months after I went there, but we would trade off the top position, a high score table on that game. And I would walk in, the bartender would say to me, "Hey, knocked you off." And he knew I wasn't leaving until I knocked him off or tried, right? So those were the games that, that's the stuff that influenced me.
Oh, that is awesome. I also, I grew up in a time in the early 80s, and my father, he loved arcade games and he loved pinball. So we always had, like, in his restaurants, we always had different rotations of different arcade games, and one being Spy Hunter, which we really loved. My father and I. And I used to play it constantly. Like, nobody else in the restaurant could ever play that game because I hogged it because I loved it so much. I just loved, my favorite thing on that game was like the little red truck that came, and it was, for some reason, it reminded me of like, and this is coming from a child's mind. It reminded me of like Optimus Prime dropping off like a James Bond car. So I always felt like that Optimus Prime was helping me out in the video game.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah.
And
that's the stuff. I tell you what, one of the most rewarding parts of my career is hearing these stories about games and toys and different things of different genres that I've worked in. Right. So, I hear stories about some of the pinball machines that I've designed that are as sort of passionate as what you described, right? Your love of that game. I hear the same thing. I had somebody just come up to me not long ago and talked to me about they didn't know it was a toy that I did. They were just talking, they just heard that I did toys, and they started talking to me about toys. And it turns out that, you know, this little mask thing that he had was like a thing that you know, I helped influence. And so it's like, you know, I mean, that stuff is that's what makes it worthwhile for me and makes it very exciting to do what I do.
Well,
That's
you
awesome.
also, I'm sorry, Matt, real quick.
No, I was just saying that's awesome.
So, I don't know if you know this, but the layout that is designed for the interviews on this show, the guy who designs it, his nickname is Graphic God, but his real name is Jay. And first off, I just want to say he's a huge fan of some of the stuff that you've worked on. Includes Satan's Hollow was like one of his favorite games of all time. But the layout that he designed for this interview format that we have on Four Guys Recorders is actually influenced by the glow of the light in Tron.
Cool. Very cool.
So
That's
he
awesome.
just wanted me to say that when you were on the
Awesome.
show.
That's awesome. I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah. And then I want to talk about pinball with you too, because I also grew up loving pinball. In my father's early days, you know, he was born in 44, and when he was growing up in parts of New York City after he came to America, pinball was like huge. It was almost like, in a way, pinball was like its own racket, because every restaurant, every bar, every club had pinball machines across his whole block in Brooklyn. Everybody had pinball machines, and he was obsessed with pinball to the point where even at home, I was 3 years old, 4 years old, and I was playing pinball in our basement because he actually owned several pinball tables. And I don't know if you remember this one, but one that he really loved, it was a 1776 table.
Yep.
And it had like it
Yep.
was almost like a wooden type of, like the number changed and everything. It wasn't
Yeah.
like all.
Another game. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, you know, pinball is has first of all, you know, we've played a big role in bringing it back, and it's back, and it's back in a big way, and I think that it has such a passionate fan base, just as passionate as the video game guys, in a different, you know, in a just in a different way, you know, but yeah, it's its own thing. It's I think I like that I like that I've been able to work and had the good fortune to be successful in these different mediums. The things I learn in one, I take to the other, right? So it's kind of like, in the end, it's all about, how do I engage people? How do I entertain them? And I've learned something about entertaining them in all these different work scenarios, right? You know, how you interact with a toy is different than how you interact with a pinball machine, different than how you interact with a video game. And yet there's a thread in that I have to engage you. I have to take you on some journey that's gonna, you know, allow you to play it your way and still have fun and discover things and evolve it and establish that relationship that you describe between you and the car and the truck and Spy Hunter, right? It's like that's what it's about. And so all the stuff, it all kind of, you know, it helps my mind to have spent time in all those places.
And one of the things with my dad, when we used to go to the Jersey Shore, is that there used to be like pinball tables there as I was growing up too. And he used to play a game with me where he would give me 1/4 or 2/4, depending on the pinball machine. And he'd say, "See how long this lasts you." And it was almost like a challenge, because my dad was really good at pinball, and he could go on, maybe with the 1/4 or 2/4,
Yeah.
he could probably go on for like
Yeah.
4 hours on a table
Sure.
or longer.
Sure. Yeah.
And he used to have this competition with me, and every time my initials came up higher than his, he'd have to play again until he beat me. So it
Hey,
became like a fun thing.
The first rule of pinball is keep the ball in play, right? It's the very
Yeah.
first rule in the, it's, games aren't games if they don't have rules, right? You can't have a game that doesn't have rules. And the very first rule of pinball is keep the ball in play. Stay in the game. If you don't stay in the game, you can't do anything else. You can't score, can't achieve things, you can't do progression,
Oh, it's such a beautiful thing. It's like pinball to me is like a fantastic masterpiece of art. You got the physics of the game, you got the electronics in most of the pinball games, you got the sounds, and and then you got two flippers, or basically two flippers, but sometimes like double flippers in the back and whatnot. But
Yeah.
it all comes together to create this unique experience. And it's just, for me, every time I look at a pinball machine, it's so fascinating because the glow of the lights, the sound of the pinball, and when you earn that extra game or that extra ball, that big loud popping sound, like you never forget those things. And it always feels exciting, like every time, no matter how old I've gotten or what. It's the same excitement of just like me being a kid walking in Toys R Us every time I touch a pinball table.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see a row of those things, right?
Oh yeah.
Say like a row of modern Stern tables, with the LCDs and everything. It's like, and all the different colors and all the things we do with them. It's just an absolute amazing thing.
Where does the design process actually start with a table?
Right. So it's like, for me, it's like, it's always been really passionate. It's really very important that the design teams are passionate about the things they're building, meaning that, you have to be into the theme. So it's like, otherwise, you're just not going to get the best out of people if they're not into the theme they're making. So it's a combination of things, right? The teams think about games they would want to make. The licensing guys come back, and because of the world we live in the modern era, everything really needs to be a license. So they come back with potential licenses, and we talk about it, and some combination of what does the company think is a good fit for the product mix that year, and what do the design teams want to build. The design teams are very diverse. They are, as I said, I mentioned all the different disciplines. They're led by the two guys that are sort of creatively in charge of forming and guiding the product are the designer and the lead developer. And then, but there's like a project artist, huge influence, the look of it, the feel of it. The guys that do all the LCD graphics, all the feedback stuff. The sound designer. It's basically, it's a relatively, the core team is a relatively small team, 7 or 8 guys. The peripheral team supporting those guys is much bigger, right? So, the computer graphics group might have 10 guys working on a project. And yet there's a lead guy that's associated to the team that's like coming back to and the same thing can be said for the software engineers. The lead developer might have some guys supporting him on different things. Somebody's making him a tool, maybe somebody else is doing something else. Somebody's doing light shows, somebody's doing, a particular feature. But it's a really complex device, because there's the physics of the real world, right? You can't always just fix the software, there's like, we have real things like electromagnets, they heat up. We have to duty cycle them. We have to worry about, how they are performing. How are they doing what they need to do? We have motors and devices and mechanisms, and we have all these different scenarios. What do you do when the ball is stuck? What do you do when this is broken? Does the game continue to play? The designers worrying about, what's the the designer and the lead developer worrying about what's the progression through the game? What are those big epic moments that we're going to expose the player to? What are the big hooks, the big feel goods? all of the things that go into, very similar to the things that are going into a AAA title today, right? It's just a different medium with the complexities of real, materials and the, the impact of things, the kinetics of the ball, all of that stuff. I mean, it's a complex product, and people don't realize it. But when you go up to a modern pinball machine, go up to state of the art. I mean, the stuff we make is state of the art in the business. And you go up to one of our pinball games and just stare at it. Get somebody to, if you're ever, next time you're in an arcade and if you get a chance, take a look at somebody when one of those games is being serviced and the playfield's up, or where the back glass is out of the game. Take a look at what's inside. I mean, it's impressive, and it can be daunting if you've never seen all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm blown away just when I see him from the outside. I mean, just it looks like there's so many pieces to have to come together to create something that is functional when you have that many moving parts, right?
Yeah, I mean,
that would be the challenge.
It's about a 14-month development cycle for each one of those things. Yeah, wow. It's about 14 months, and like I said, that you have a core team of about 7 or 8 guys, but there's a peripheral bunch of guys that are supporting, guys and girls that are supporting that effort. And then of course, we have 110,000 square feet behind O'Hare Airport in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. That's our manufacturing facility. That's where the studio is also, and we churn out all these pinball machines there, and so there's the manufacturing elements integrated with the fact that you're designing this fun thing. That's another element that we have to we have to make them cost the right amount. We have to make them reliable, have to fit in boxes. They go all over the world. Before COVID, we exported probably 40% of our product to Western Europe and Australia, and our business is we have different price points, and we have a commercial business, the machines that you find at a barcade or bowling alley or movie theater lobby, and then we have a home business, consumer business, people that are hobbyists that own them in their house. And when our commercial business got hit because of COVID, and those locations had to close down, our consumer business exploded because people are stuck at home, and we're like, what? They can't go on vacation. They've got the money they were going to spend on vacation. They bought a pinball machine. So there's a lot of so we've been very fortunate. We've kept the company healthy, and we've managed to, we were shut down for 3 months this year. The government shut us down for 3 months. And so we have a big backlog of back orders that we're trying to fulfill now. We're back up and running. My studio, we had to do what everybody else did, right? We had to figure out how to work remote. I miss the energy, the buzz of the studio, all these different teams working on different stuff, guys asking you to come and play, come and play this game. Check this out. What do you think? All of that, sort of those kind of hallway conversations about how to solve a problem. The activity, guys screwing games together, guys making, parts, the 3D printers running in the corner, all this stuff, right? That energy and that buzz, I miss that a lot. And so now it's all happening in diverse little spots. And then now we're starting to slowly come back together. And it'll be some time before we're back, like everybody else. And we've learned, we've learned a lot of things. I think that we've learned a lot of things about ourselves and about a process and how we make games. And I think, we'll take those back. We'll be better. We'll be stronger. And we learn from it, right?
Yeah. So I have 2 questions for you. Do you have a favorite either pinball or game that you worked on? And do you have a favorite modern game that you like to play? Because you did say you still play games.
Yeah. So, it's tough. It's tough for me to. It's tough for me to pick a favorite. because games are like my games are. They're kind of a moment in time.
Yeah.
Like I can stand in front of any one of my games and play them. I don't care what it is. And my brain goes back to that time, all the things that were going on in my life and all the challenges and all the things that I faced when I was making the game. I can remember that stuff. And so it's an interesting kind of like, it's this little snapshot of time exposed by the game, right? I have favorites over the years. I think that of my own games, a few years ago, the last game that I actually got to design, where I I wasn't supposed to be designing it, but we got into some trouble with some other things, and I had to jump in and do this game. Was Deadpool Pinball, and that game to this day still has me hooked. And that's good. Historically, over the years, I mean, I like my Monster Bash game a lot, and clearly the video games. I mean, I still every once in a while the original NBA Ballers is the best NBA Ballers game that we made, and sometimes I have kids come over, and and I'll play that game with them. And because kids can pick up anything and play it, right? Yeah. And that game is still like, I mean, that game holds up, and it's like, you stop after you play that game for a little while, you look past the graphics, you look past, because I mean, that's the first thing that hits you is, wow, video games have come such a long way. But, I mean, it's like, I don't, yeah, so it's hard to say a favorite of the modern era games. So I play a lot of driving games. I was a big fan. I was a big fan of Halo and a big fan of the Gears of War series. So every once in a while, like when those guys have come up with some new derivative, I've picked it up. I'm so busy nowadays. I have very little time for this. I do still. I find time for, I'm a car nut, if you can't tell, for my car collection. So I still find time for Forza, and I still find time for Gran Turismo from time to time. Very, diverse products, but I still enjoy them both for the things that they are.
Yeah.
And I have a nasty habit of, I have to have the latest console. Even if I play it 3 times a year, sometimes it takes me a long time it took me forever to get, to really put some miles on my Xbox Ones. I bought them right away, and then I bought a bunch of games and they sat there, but modern video games for me are like, I'm a big fan of campaign modes. I'm not, you will not find me playing online with kids or anything else, just with somebody else. I'm not that into that, but I will, give me a good story and let me discover something, and I'm good. I have and so I will sit down and especially on holidays, it's like a thing for me. It's like it's part of the holiday. Yeah. The notion that I'm gonna today. I've done everything I needed to do, all the family stuff and everything else. My family usually we celebrate on the 24th of Christmas, and on the 25th, that's the day that you will find me immersed in some video game where the fiction. Because that's the other thing is I'm not I'm interested in some new fiction more so than perhaps a new play mechanic, right?
Yeah.
So
you like the story and the worlds that
I like the world. I like the discovery elements of the world, and so you can. I mean, that's kind of my that's my thing.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. It's awesome that you play games, even if you only play them on certain occasions. It's still really cool.
You know what? Like everything you do, it's like I think to be a good designer, I think you have to immerse yourself in, just sort of the context of the things that you work in, and so you got to know something about all of it. And I'm telling you that if somebody impresses me with some event or presentation in a AAA game, don't be surprised when you see me implement that in a pinball machine.
Right.
Meaning, the conceptually, not the not the thing, but the thing I learned from from discovering that, right?
So, I have a couple questions for you. Two from the chat, one for myself. So, one person on Twitch asks if there is a chance to do a Mortal Kombat pinball. I'm not sure if you guys have done one yet, or if maybe
Right. So, it's funny. I was just asked that question by another interviewer. My second pinball machine ever was almost Mortal Kombat. And at the time, I think Ed Boon was working on the second Mortal Kombat game, Mortal Kombat 2. And I walked into his office because I had the thought that, wow, it'd be cool to do a challenge ladder and, face different opponents. And so I had this notion that, I could maybe do something with this. And I wanted to play I had a very radical concept, which was to play with the notion of a life as opposed to 3 balls, right? So, so basically when he took the life out, when you took your life, flippers went dead, you were out, so as opposed to, so I did think about it. I did talk to Ed. I said, hey, do you mind if I do this? And he was like, no, he says, you go ahead. And then one of the other designers, a famous pinball designer, Steve Ritchie, said, hey, I got dibs on that title. I had been thinking about doing it long before you got here. And so I was like, okay, I defer, and the marketing guys at the time were also of the opinion that the audiences didn't cross over. And so they thought, yeah, it's two different animals. I don't know if they interact. And so that's not one that I would say, it's not unlikely. At the same time, yeah, it's got some challenges.
Yeah, Ed Boon actually came from pinball himself. Like he was actually worked on pinball machines.
Yeah, and so and he's a friend. So I said to him at the time, and I was just getting to know him back then. But he was working on the second game, and I do remember I was working late one night, and I walked in his office. He was there. He used to live there, especially when they were getting close to shipping those games. He was just living there, and I sat down and said, hey, so I had this idea, and what do you think about this? And he was like, yeah, it's cool. And go do it. And I never got real far. I laid out a play field, and like I said, another interviewer asked me about this a couple of weeks ago, and just coincidentally.
Wow.
Huh.
So
Awesome.
that's interesting. Then Graphic God says, did you ever design the nickel pinball bingo tables that he played as a 12-year-old and win in money?
Nope. Missed that.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. Maybe that's a Canadian thing, but I never seen those.
A Canadian thing.
I mean,
yeah, I don't know if they had those in the States. I'm not sure. Maybe in Vegas.
And Wow, now the question I was going to ask you slipped my mind. Oh, there it is. Okay, it just came back to me. So, I know that you said that you played the Halo campaigns and the Gears of War campaigns. Have you ever thought or Stern ever thought about doing maybe like a Halo pinball table or a Gears of War pinball
Yeah,
table?
actually, yeah, I think we have.
Oh
We
man.
have. So you have to remember that. So when we pick a license, right, one of the things that one of the uh, we may be the biggest company in pinball by far, but we're not. That doesn't make us a big company. So we have to be very careful with the risks that we take. And while Halo is a incredibly well-known brand, and actually those guys have talked to us a couple of times. I think Alison Stroll over there has reached out and said, you guys, we'd love for you guys to do this, and we've considered it. And the issue that we have with licenses is that we don't have that does directly speak to the thing that I mentioned before, where there's that concern. What does my traditional audience relate to this enough to make that successful? And so I'd love to do it personally, because I have history with the brand in terms of my own entertainment, right? So I would love to do it. I mean, to me that's like it's like sometimes I fantasize about the notion of a passion project, right? Where I don't have to answer anybody. I'm just going to make this thing, and I'm going to make one. I don't care, And so that is the kind of thing that you might find me making, right? Just for the hell of it, just because I like it. But the getting back on point, when we select a license, we try to, we don't have room to be wrong, and we have to hit the broadest possible audience. So mom's got to let it in the house, and dad's got to want it. Junior's going to want to play with dad. It's got to work on the street in a barcade with 20 somethings. It's got to work in the basement in the rec room. It's got to work in the movie theater lobby for the casual player. It's got to work everywhere. So it's kind of like, and my audience is literally that diverse, right? So this will surprise you, fastest growing element of my audience is 20 somethings. They're discovering pinball in the barcades. They're getting into pinball. My hope is that, our hope is that, maybe not in the next 10 years, but when they start, when they settle down or they start making money, that's a future customer. So we want them to have those, great memories of, playing this thing in the barcade, right? With kids, we want the interaction that, we went to the movie theater, we went to the bowling alley. Like, remember I said I used to go to in Cub Scouts, we'd go bowling, right? And I'd sneak off to the arcade, right? We want that happening today, right? We want the bowling alley to have pinball machines so that, little people will get into pinball, right? So because they'll have a positive mental experience of, wow, look at this amazing world with lights and things and stuff happening. And they'll remember that fondly as they grow, and it becomes a part of their entertainment staples, right? So yeah, Halo, would love to do it. I don't know, we would need to kind of wrap our heads around, is it a brand that we say, I like to say we have to pick 3 bullets. Every bullet's got to hit its target. They have to be, we don't have room to miss. Every bullseye's got to be hit, with the arrow this year.
I'll make a pitch for Halo. I'm a huge Halo fan. Okay, so here's my pitch to somebody that has the power to make this happen.
I have it's like, to me, the game makes itself, right?
Right.
To me, the game makes itself. I know exactly what to do, but So it's like we just need to understand there's a crossover audience or not, you know?
Yeah. So here, Halo, make it dark, incorporate the flood. You're a Spartan trapped on a Halo piece that's floating through space, and you're in a place. You discover the flood. You have to fight them off. Make it dark. If you make it dark, it'll sell.
I love it.
It'll be original.
I love it.
That's my pitch. So
I can see it. I mean, you know what? That epic music, right?
yeah, 100%. You got to get that dark. Start out, you start out just like your first Halo. You start out cool, relax. Hey, what's this cool place? Then you get dark in the middle of it. You start losing your balls there.
Yeah.
I think you got something there.
Master Chief's voice comes in every time you lose the ball or you pull the lever. Yeah. That would be. I'm gonna say that that would be really
Cortana.
Cool.
I mean, it makes itself, right?
Yeah. I don't love Halo or nothing.
AI voice guiding you through the game. Got it. Yeah. I got it. It's done.
Yeah.
And then I guess two more quick questions before, if Mav has any questions before we end the interview, because I know it's been a while. So Graphic God sent me a picture of the bingo table that he was talking about, and now it might make more sense to you because it makes a little bit more sense to me. It's called Bally Palm Beach.
I'm sure I've heard of it, and when I see it, I may have recognized it, but it's definitely not one of mine.
Yeah, it looks like an older style machine for sure. It doesn't look. It actually looks very old for a machine. So.
Right.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask you was I know that I actually have a disc of Stern Pinball for Xbox. And I'm not sure if that's something that you guys are continuing or adding on to, but
we're continuing. But right now we're very interested in a bigger footprint in the video game world as a company, and we're exploring right now. We're exploring a strategy to make a much bigger splash as an extension of our brand in digital pinball. And so we are working with a powerful partner, and we hope that in some future you'll see some really amazing stuff. I think that our you have to remember that so when we got into that business, we got into it at a time when the company was very focused on its survival. And so we didn't have a lot of bandwidth to devote to supporting or developing a digital pinball business. We're in a different place now, and we see it. The next big thing that you're going to see happen in our pinball machines is connectivity. When I connect the games, there's a variety of different strategies that are going to come with that. There's a bunch of peripheral things like the digital business that dovetail with that stuff. And so to answer your question, we are very interested in that business, but we're interested in it. We want it to be very reflective of our brand. We want it to be the best in the world at what that is, and so we're focusing on that.
That sounds freaking incredible. I get a sense that something is happening and something is coming in the future. You can't tell too much about it right now. I'm curious who the heck the partner is that you speak of. I can't wait to see what this is, man. I could just see lots of possibilities because I've always been a fan of pinball, and I've thought that the games themselves, especially on console and stuff, were just not necessarily that they're bad or anything. They're just kind of lacking that same experience that you can get by playing on a table.
Yeah, I think so I think the effort requires, I think for the effort to be uh, uh, pure and really reflective of who we are, it's got to be influenced by guys that live and breathe pinball machines. And so I think that, I think it's one thing, as it's one thing for an outsider to look at a pinball table, believe they understand the game, and create digital pinball. It's from our perspective, very few of them are even our own are representative, and so we feel like we could do something, and that's where we want to go, and beyond that, we're building this kind of Stern ecosystem of different pieces of business, tentacles of business that we want to explore, and I'm all about let's get them all, let's get some synergy across them, and leverage the things that we do really well in one into some of the other ones, and get a lot of strength. We're starting to do. You've seen our in the last 4 years, the growth in our accessory business has been explosive, right? Explosive meaning, accessories tricking out your pinball machine, right? And we're creating accessories that have interactive components. You buy the thing and you get more gameplay stuff with the hardware. So when the Stern game plugs into the topper brings rules and play features that it didn't normally have. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. And so we see it, and we see the success of it. It's like our Stranger Things game has this UV light kit that basically, when the game is in the upside down mode, everything changes. We turn on all these UV LEDs, everything changes. It's pretty cool. It's got a bunch of hidden art that you don't see until the UV lights come on. People love that kind of stuff. We can't keep those things in stock. So you say, I want success. I want success in our accessories business. I want success in my parts business. I want success in my events business. I want success in my digital business. And of course, I want to be the dominant player in real pinball. I want less expensive models. I want more expensive models. I want to be the world of pinball. If it's Stern pinball, I want a footprint. If it's pinball, I want a place. And I want a dominant place, because I'm the best. We're the best in the world. So why wouldn't we strive for quality and performance, like we get from the games, in all of those areas of business, all of those areas of entertainment? That's what I want.
That's protecting the brand and pushing the brand to be quality. That's great.
It is, yeah. And I gotta say, I was looking at some of your license tables at Stern Pinball, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles table just like pops out to me. It's something that I love, and I I wish I could convince my wife that I need a pinball table.
That's an amazing table.
We talk about the passion of the teams, right? How important the passion of the teams is to creating the product, and that team grew up with that fiction. That team that worked on that game grew up with that fiction, just like you did, and it's so obvious when you play the game. Every element of that game is consistent to the brand, consistent to the experience, that everything you remember about the cartoon show, your toys, your all of the stuff you had, your comic books, everything is in there, because these guys grew up with it, and they were like, you know, the licensor had to do very little education. They were like, yeah, no, we got this, you know. So I mean, that's the look. I mean, we do, you know, we address all kinds of things, right? It was like when I did Deadpool, Marvel was amazing. They basically, every creator that has touched the Deadpool fiction has gotten some amount of latitude into creating a piece of Deadpool's world. And I got that latitude to create the world I created inside that pinball machine. And so I think that's been the success of the product, by the way. The fact that wow, here's some cool new representation of Deadpool and all the things in his world. And yet it's consistent to who he is, to the brand. It's purely, absolutely consistent. Yet here's a bunch of new stuff. It's like saying, okay, here's a new writer, new inker, new comic, you know, new artist, and you give them a book and you say, okay, you guys are doing, you know, a new series on Deadpool, and that's the freedom we got, and that's the, and I think it reflects in the success we've had with it, you know.
Oh man, I mean, just yeah, looking. I gotta say this: if I'm ever like in the Illinois area where you guys are, I'd love to come in. Yeah, I'd love to. Oh man.
Yeah, no, we do. So we do tours. I mean, clearly, life's been different in COVID, so we haven't, you know, we've cut out. We haven't done any tours during COVID times. But as the world begins to get more normal, that stuff will be there, and you know, come and see us. And it's we do tours all the time, and the studio is a different story. It's tough to get a studio tour, but you know, you never know. You might see a limited. Maybe we can figure something out.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know that Carlo, you're on it with those emails, so maybe we can take a field trip one day. Man, that turtles. I'm with you though, man. That's like my favorite table that they have.
Yeah.
Just browsing through the catalogs and stuff.
You guys, where are you guys located?
I'm in Florida.
Yeah, I'm in Dallas.
Yeah, come and see us sometime.
Awesome. Well,
absolutely.
Now, did you have any questions before we close the interview?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time to be here and share the amazing, crazy stories, going from 2 Cuban refugees making Spy Hunter and to, you know, all the way through, you know, creating a pinball to where you are as a like big time part. I guess you said chief officer of
chief creative officer.
Chief creative officer of Stern Pinball.
I didn't give myself the title. The owners of the company.
Yeah, but that's. I mean, what a journey. The influences that you've had throughout video games and entertainment and stuff that we've all enjoyed and grown up to love is incredible. So just super appreciate you being here and sharing all of that with us.
Well, I hope people like the interview, and thanks for inviting me on. I'm thrilled that you guys like the work. That's a big part of my joy, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. And again, thank you, George. I know that probably when you started out in this business, you had no idea that you would be considered like a pioneer, or how much your work would have influenced things going forward. But you've been a huge part of this industry, and I know, you mentioned Brian Collin, and I actually had a chance to meet him at a pinball convention, and he did follow me on Twitter. So it was kind of like unreal to hear that you've actually worked with him in some sense, or known him as well. So
I hired him.
Did you?
Yeah, I gave him his first job in the business. I hired him.
Oh wow,
that's another whole story. He's a super talented guy. Like really, the guy is a ball of creative energy. Really.
Wow. Well, fantastic stuff that you're doing. Keep up the great work. I mean, for guys like Mav and I, it is very inspirational. We do look up to all these artistic creations in the video game industry. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot, guys. See you later.
Bye.
Bye, George.
And to the chat, thank you for coming by. For everybody who hung out with us, we went on almost 2 hours. I can't believe it. Like, what a fantastic guy. Really loved every second of this and the stories in the industry. And Mav, before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody, what you've been up to, where people can find you, and congrats, lady, for joining Xbox Ultimate.
Yeah. So that we made that announcement yesterday. We asked her she wanted to be a part of it. She said yes, and super excited to have her on as many shows as she can make time for. Just lots of awesome stuff. That thankful to anybody that's wanted to be a part of our show. So, and to everybody in the chat, thank you for being here. It's awesome for you, the questions you put in there, and also the feedback you give to all of us for what we're doing. So appreciate you. And Clowns, thanks for setting up another amazing interview with such a freaking legend. Pretty incredible the stuff that you're putting together for us to pick these like guys' brains. It's just like I can't believe I'm even able to sit here and take part in this, dude. And so I super appreciate that. But yeah, so we're going live tomorrow night for Fun Pop, and then Friday night for Xbox Ultimate. Last night I got to hang out with Noof on Gaming After Dark. That was fun. But yeah, man, what else do you got going on?
Well, so speaking of tomorrow, I have 2 interviews booked for tomorrow.
What's going on, man? All right. What's booked for tomorrow? Because I know you sent this stuff to me, and I just can't keep up. I don't know how you can keep up.
I can't,
because when you book it, I don't even know how. Like, I'm trying to keep up and remember this stuff. So what's going on tomorrow?
So we have Triona Farrell. She's a colorist that works on Marvel, Dark Horse, Image, and Vault. And then we have Matt Hill from Ed and Eddie.
Okay.
And we have a guest panelist on that one. It's Jokey is gonna join us, Jokey Pants, for that one.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's a big Ed and Eddie fan. That's right.
Yes, he's huge. So we're gonna make his live dream come true, and he wants to talk like Rolf for at least a good 5 minutes, he said, and see if he can impress the guest. So yeah, that's what we got going on. And then Friday we have an interview with Square Enix, with Aaron Kaufman. So that's gonna be fun. And then
what time is that one on Friday? Do you remember?
I believe that one is 11 a.m. Eastern. I will double check and put it in the group chat for sure. And we actually have some more coming up after that as well, but I gotta just check those emails, Mav. Just gotta check those emails.
Right on, dude.
But again, George, was awesome. Love talking to you, and everything that you talked about just hit. I mean, it really hit home for me. If you're still listening, it was a majority of my time growing up in the arcades, at my dad's restaurants. Spy Hunter was a game that I just adored. I love that game, and I buy iterations of that game as well. Still to this day. And he mentioned Space Invaders. I didn't get a chance to tell him this, but we actually had a red Space Invaders cabinet on our porch, in our backyard. And it was really popular for a while until my cousin shot it with a BB gun, but it was very functional before that. So it was, just awesome stuff, man. And to the chat, thank you for hanging out with us. It's been a long 2 hours, and I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you guys showing up to our podcast, of the Gamers United Guild podcast, to Xbox Ultimate, to Fun Pop, everything that is part of the Four Guys team. I can't thank the team enough, because I will always say this, that you can have a podcast and you can be a host, but your team really makes up a majority of the success. And I know that Mav is starting fun speculation, and I know that he's gonna feel the same way. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to everyone at Four Guys Recorders and Gamers United Guild, and see you guys tomorrow.
Bye.